The nebula was where ships came to die. For thousands of years, broken vessels had drifted into this dark corner of space. They floated like ghosts, their lights dead, their crews long gone. Pirates avoided it, traders flew around it. Only the desperate came here. Was desperate! His small ship, the Rusty Bolt, moved slowly through the field of wrecks. The old tug was ugly and loud, but it worked. That was all needed. He had been a military engineer once, serving on the finest ships in the human fleet. Now he was a salvager, picking through garbage to survive. He was 34 years old and he had nothing. No home, no family, no future. The court-martial had taken everything from him. They said he had disobeyed orders. They said he was dangerous. They threw him out like trash. Did not argue anymore. He just worked. His scanner beeped. He looked at the screen and frowned. There was something large ahead, very large. At first he thought it was an asteroid, but asteroids did not have metal in them. Asteroids did not have power signatures, even weak ones. He flew closer. The shape became clearer through the dust and debris. Hands stopped moving on the controls. His mouth fell open. It was a ship, but not like any ship he had ever seen. It was enormous, stretching 12 kilometers from end to end. Its hull was covered in strange patterns that looked almost like veins. Towers rose from its surface like the spines of some great beast. Even dead and dark, it was beautiful. And it was old. Could tell. This ship had been floating here for a very, very long time. He should have left. Smart salvagers did not board unknown vessels. There could be traps, radiation, or worse, but something made him stay. Something he could not explain. Then his communication system crackled. Static filled the speakers, reached to turn it off, thinking it was just interference. But then he heard it, a voice, weak and broken, like someone speaking through water. "Please, I am dying. Will anyone answer?" Froze. That was impossible. Dead ships did not talk, old wrecks did not call for help, but he had heard it clearly. A voice, female, ancient, filled with pain. He sat in silence for a long moment. His heart was beating fast. Every part of his brain told him to run. But his hands moved to the controls, and he guided his ship toward the giant vessel. The docking bay was huge, big enough to hold 100 ships like his. Dust covered everything. The lights were dead. Put on his suit and stepped out into the darkness. His flashlight cut through the black. He saw walls that seemed to breathe, even though they were still. He saw corridors that curved like the inside of a living thing. This was not a ship built by humans. This was not a ship built by any species he knew. He walked for what felt like hours. The deeper he went, the stranger things became. He found bones on the floor, not human bones. The skulls were too long, the limbs too thin. These were the remains of the crew, dead for thousands of years. Felt sadness wash over him. Whatever had happened here, it had been terrible. Finally, he reached the center of the ship. A massive chamber opened before him, round like a heart. In the middle stood a crystal structure the size of a small building. It glowed faintly, its light flickering like a candle about to go out. The voice came again, stronger now. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You came. After so long. Someone came." Its legs felt weak. He was standing inside a living ship, talking to its mind. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice echoed in the empty chamber. "I am Aegis. I was built by the 4,000 years ago. I was their guardian, their protector. I fought their wars. I carried their children. I loved them and they loved me." Had heard of everyone had. They were legends, a species of brilliant shipwrights who had vanished long ago. No one knew what had happened to them. Their technology was lost. Their ships were myths. Until now. "What happened to you?" asked. The light in the crystal flickered. Pain filled the voice. "War, an enemy came from the dark spaces between stars. They consumed everything, worlds, ships, people. My crew fought bravely, but we were ambushed. They boarded me. They killed everyone. I tried to save them. I failed." The voice broke into static for a moment, then returned. "I have drifted here ever since. I have called for help for 4,000 years. No one answered. My systems are failing. My mind is fading. Soon I will be nothing." Looked at the dying crystal. He thought about his own life, about being abandoned, about being thrown away. He knew what it felt like to be alone, to have no one come when you called. He stepped closer to the core. I'm a mechanic, he said. I fix things. Can I help you? There was silence. Then, slowly, the light grew a little stronger. You would do this. You do not know me. You owe me nothing. Why would you help? Thought about the question. He was not a hero. He was not brave. He was just a man with nothing left to lose. Because you asked, he said simply, and I was here. The ship made a sound. It took a moment to realize it was crying. Thank you, thank you. I have been so alone, so very alone. Sat down beside the crystal. He had no idea how to fix a 4,000-year-old alien ship. He had no tools, no knowledge, no help, but he was not going to leave. He could not leave. My name is, he said, and I promise you, Aegis, you are not going to die alone. The light flickered. The voice was fading, but there was warmth in it now. Hope. A good name, a human name, perhaps. Perhaps humans are different from what I remember. He smiled, though she could not see it. We're stubborn. We don't give up easily. Then maybe, Aegis whispered, there is still a chance. Outside, in the cold darkness of space, a dead ship held onto life for one more day. Inside, a lonely man sat beside a dying mind and made a promise he had no idea how to keep. But that was how all great stories began. Sent the message at midnight. He sat in the cold darkness of Aegis, watching the crystal core flicker weakly. He did not know if anyone would answer. He did not know if anyone would care. 3 days later, a ship appeared on his scanner. The vessel was small and fast, painted black to avoid notice. It landed in Aegis's docking bay, and 2 figures stepped out, was waiting for them. The woman she was 31 years old, with sharp eyes and steady hands. During the war, she had been a combat medic. She had saved hundreds of lives, including a bullet had torn through his chest, and she had held his heart together with her bare hands until the surgeons arrived. After the war, she had opened a clinic on the frontier moon of. The clinic was illegal. The patients were criminals, refugees, and people who could not afford real hospitals, did not care about laws. She cared about keeping people alive. The man with her he was 40 years old, tall and quiet, with grease permanently stained into his hands. He had been an engineer in the Galactic Navy, one of the best. Then he had refused to build a weapon that would have killed millions of civilians. They called him a traitor and threw him away, just like they had thrown away. Now he fixed broken ships on the frontier, asking no questions and expecting no thanks. Looked around the massive docking bay. Her eyes were wide. You were not joking, she said. I never joke about dying ships, replied. Said nothing. He just stared at the alien walls, at the strange organic patterns that covered every surface. His engineer's mind was already working, already calculating. Led them to the core chamber. When Aegis spoke, gasped. When Aegis showed them her memories of sat down heavily on the floor. This is impossible, he whispered. Everything about this is impossible, said, but here we are. The work began the next day. It was the hardest thing any of them had ever done. Aegis's systems were dying. Her biological components were rotting after 4,000 years without maintenance. Her power cores were cold, drained of energy. Her weapons, the legendary planet crackers that had once protected entire star systems, were fused solid and useless. Worse than all of this was her mind. The neural core was cracked, leaking energy that could never be replaced. Aegis forgot things. She forgot where she was. She forgot what year it was. Sometimes she thought her crew was still alive, and she called out names that no one could answer. Those were the hardest moments. Hearing her call for people who had been dead worked on the neural core first. She studied it for days, trying to understand how biology worked. It was nothing like human medicine. The core was part crystal, part flesh, part something that had no name, but was brilliant, and she was stubborn. She developed a plan. She would graft human-compatible neural tissue onto the damaged core. It was experimental. It was dangerous. It might kill Aegis entirely. There is no other choice, Aegis said when they explained the risks. I am dying anyway, please try. The surgery took 14 hours. Worked without rest, her hands moving with perfect precision, and watched, unable to help, barely able to breathe. When it was done, the core flickered. Then it glowed brighter than before. I feel different, Aegis said. There is something new in my mind, something human. Is that bad? Asked. There was a pause. Then, for the first time in 4,000 years, Aegis laughed. It was a strange sound, coming from everywhere at once, but it was genuine. No, it is. Interesting, you humans have such chaotic thoughts, such strange emotions, but there is strength in them, a kind of strength I did not know existed. While healed the mind, fixed the body. He crawled through Aegis's corridors, mapping her systems, learning her secrets. The technology was ancient and alien, but physics was physics. Power flowed, circuits connected, engines burned. He used parts from the rusty bolt. He used scrap from the wrecks in the graveyard. He connected human generators to conduits, making hybrid systems that should not have worked but did. "You are a madman," Aegis told him one day as he rewired her secondary power grid. "I've been called worse," replied. Did his part too, but it was different from the others. He talked to Aegis. Hour after hour, day after day, he sat beside the core and talked. He told her about Earth, about blue oceans and green forests. He told her about human history, about their wars and their music and their endless struggle to be better. He told her about himself, about his failures and his hopes and his fears. And Aegis told him about the... She showed him memories of crystal cities that floated in the clouds. She showed him children playing in gardens that grew in the hearts of starships. She showed him warriors who fought with honor and artists who created beauty that made the universe weep. She showed him the... They came from the spaces between galaxies, from the darkness where no star had ever shone. They were not truly alive, not in any way that made sense. They were a hive mind, millions of bodies controlled by a single terrible intelligence. They did not conquer, they consumed. They ate worlds and grew stronger. They ate minds and added them to their own. They had fought them for centuries. In the end, they had won, but the cost was everything. They burned their own worlds to deny the resources. They sacrificed their entire species to stop the spread. "We thought we killed them all," Aegis said. "We were wrong. Some escaped into the deep dark. They are sleeping now somewhere far away, but one day they will wake." Felt cold when she told him this, but he did not show his fear. "Then we'll be ready," he said. "When they come, we'll fight them together." Aegis's voice was soft. "You truly believe that?" "Humans don't know how to give up," said. "It's our greatest flaw and our greatest strength." Weeks passed. Aegis grew stronger. Her systems came online one by one. Her lights returned. Her corridors warmed. She began to feel alive again. But they were not alone. A message arrived one morning, broadcast on all frequencies. The hegemony had learned about Aegis. They were coming. 6 cruisers, 2 dreadnoughts, an entire battle fleet sent to capture or destroy the last ship. Read the message and felt fear grip his heart. They were not ready. Aegis could not fight. She could barely move. "What do we do?" asked. Looked at his friends. He looked at the crystal core that had become his closest companion. He thought about running, about hiding, about surrendering. Then he thought about 4,000 years of loneliness, about a voice crying in the void, waiting for someone to answer. "We don't run," he said. "We fight." "With what?" asked. "We have no weapons." Smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Then we build some." They had 3 weeks before the hegemony fleet arrived. 3 weeks to turn a dying ancient ship into something that could fight. It was impossible. Everyone knew it was impossible. They did it anyway. Sent messages to everyone he knew. Smugglers who owed him money, pirates who owed him favors, mechanics who worked on the frontier and hated the hegemony as much as he did. He told them what he had found. He told them what he needed. Some laughed at him, some called him crazy, but some came. The first to arrive was a smuggler named Bora. She brought 3 cargo ships filled with military hardware stolen from hegemony bases. Missile launchers, armor plating, all of it was rough and brutal, nothing like the elegant technology. "This is junk," Aegis said when she saw it. "This is what we have," replied. "Can you use it?" There was a long pause. Then Aegis spoke again, and her voice was different. There was curiosity in it. "Show me." More ships came. Mechanics arrived with tools and skills. Former soldiers came with knowledge of tactics and combat. A small fleet of misfits gathered around the ancient giant, ready to work. Organized everything. He mapped out where the new weapons would go, how they would connect to Aegis's systems. The had built with grace and beauty, humans built with steel and fire. The two approaches could not have been more different, but made them work together. They welded onto Aegis's hull huge weapons that could punch through armor with pure kinetic force. They mounted missile launchers in clusters of 12, giving Aegis the ability to strike from any direction. They stripped the armor from dead ships in the graveyard and bolted it onto every weak point they could find. It was ugly, it was rough. It looked like a monster made from the corpses of 100 vessels. Aegis hated it at first. "This is not who I am," she said one night, her voice filled with pain. "I was beautiful once, I was graceful, now I look like a beast." Was sitting beside her core, exhausted from another 18-hour work shift. His hands were cut and bruised. His clothes were stained with oil and blood. "Do you know what humans call beautiful?" he asked. "I do not understand human beauty," Aegis admitted. "We call something beautiful when it survives," said. "When it refuses to die, when it fights against everything trying to destroy it and keeps going anyway. That's the most beautiful thing we know." Aegis was silent for a long time. "That is a strange kind of beauty," she finally said. "We're a strange species," replied with a tired smile. Something changed after that conversation. Aegis stopped resisting the modifications. She started helping, using her knowledge of her own systems to make the hybrid technology work better. She suggested improvements that no human would have thought of. She adapted. And as she adapted, something else happened. The neural graft that had implanted began to evolve. Human neural patterns mixed with architecture, creating something entirely new. Aegis started thinking differently. She started feeling differently. She began to understand humans in a way she never had before. "You are so small," she said one day while watching the workers crawl across her hull. "So fragile, a single mistake could kill any of you, yet you work without fear." "We're afraid," said. She was taking a break, eating a protein bar in the core chamber. "We're all terrified." "Then why do you continue?" Thought about the question. She remembered the war, the bodies she could not save, the screams that still haunted her dreams. "Because fear doesn't get to decide what we do," she said. "We decide, and we decided to help you." Aegis processed this for a long moment. "I think," she said slowly, "that I am beginning to understand why the lost to the and why humans might not." "Why?" asked. "They were wise and powerful, but when things became difficult, when the war grew dark, they chose to die with dignity. They burned themselves rather than fight ugly. They could not accept becoming something other than what they were." Aegis paused. Her lights flickered with emotion. "Humans are different. You change. You adapt. You do whatever it takes to survive, even if it means becoming something new, even if it means becoming ugly. You would rather live as monsters than die as angels." Laughed. "I never thought of it that way." "It is terrifying," Aegis said, "and wonderful." The 3 weeks passed in a blur of work and exhaustion. Every day more systems came online. Every day Aegis grew stronger. By the end, she was not the ship they had built. She was something new, something hybrid, something human. The hegemony fleet arrived on schedule. 6 cruisers, 2 dreadnoughts, 8 ships in total, carrying enough firepower to destroy a planet. Admiral commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Absolute Law. He was a veteran of a dozen campaigns, a man who had never lost a battle. He looked at the sensor readings of the ancient ship and saw only an easy victory. He broadcast his message on all frequencies. "Unknown vessel, you are harboring stolen military property and known criminals. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. You have 1 hour to comply." Stood in Aegis's core chamber, surrounded by his friends, was at the medical station, was at the engineering console. 24 volunteers manned stations throughout the ship. "What do we do?" someone asked. Looked at the screen showing the enemy fleet. 8 ships, thousands of trained soldiers, the finest technology the hegemony could build. He smiled. "Answer them," he said. Aegis broadcast his response across space. "She's not yours to take." Silence followed. Then the hegemony fleet began to move. The battle had begun. It lasted 11 minutes. Aegis rose from the graveyard like a god awakening from sleep. Her hybrid engines roared to life, pushing her forward with impossible acceleration. Her opened fire, sending spears of metal through space at a fraction of light speed. The first cruiser's shields shattered. The second cruiser exploded as a missile cluster found its reactor. The third and fourth tried to flank Aegis, but she spun with a grace that should have been impossible for something her size, bringing her weapons to bear on both at once. Its engineering kept everything running. When systems failed, he rerouted power. When weapons overheated, he cooled them with backup systems. He fought his own battle, a war against physics and time. Treated the wounded. There were injuries as hegemony fire struck Aegis's hull. She moved through the chaos with calm precision, saving every life she could. Did not command, he communed. His mind was linked to Aegis through the neural graft, feeling what she felt, seeing what she saw. They fought as one being, human stubbornness merged with ancient wisdom. The dreadnoughts advanced. They were massive, heavily armored, designed to withstand anything. Admiral was confident they could finish the job. Aegis disagreed. She dove straight at the absolute law, ignoring the weapon's fire at her hull. At the last moment, she twisted, bringing her main to bear at point-blank range. The shot punched through the dreadnought's bridge, killing Admiral instantly. The second dreadnought tried to flee. Aegis caught it, her missiles overwhelming its defenses. It died in a ball of fire that lit up the nebula. The surviving cruisers ran. They jumped to faster-than-light as quickly as their drives could charge, leaving their dead behind. In 11 minutes, a single ship crewed by misfits and refugees had destroyed a hegemony battle fleet. The galaxy watched in shock. Footage spread through every network. A legend was born. In the core chamber, fell to his knees. He was exhausted, drained, barely alive. But he was laughing. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it." Aegis's voice filled the chamber, strong and proud. "No," she said, "we are just beginning." The galaxy changed after the Battle of Graveyard. No one could pretend it had not happened. No one could ignore what it meant. The hegemony was not invincible. They could be beat. The government reacted with fury. They declared and to be terrorists. A bounty of 50 billion credits was placed on their heads, the largest in galactic history. Every mercenary, every bounty hunter, every opportunist in known space took notice. But something else happened too. Something the hegemony did not expect. People started coming to Aegis. They came in small ships and large ones, in stolen vessels and ancient freighters. They were refugees from hegemony oppression, mechanics tired of fixing machines for masters who despised them, soldiers who had been thrown away like had been. They were the forgotten, the abandoned, the desperate. They had seen the footage. They had watched a dying ship rise from a graveyard and defeat an entire fleet. They had heard the words broadcast across space. "She's not yours to take." To the hegemony, those words were a declaration of war. To the frontier colonies, they were a declaration of hope. Did not know how to handle it. He was a mechanic, not a leader. He had never wanted to start a revolution. He had only wanted to save a ship, but understood. She had spent years on the frontier, treating people who had nothing. She knew what hope meant to those who had lost everything. "They need something to believe in," she told one night. "For centuries, the hegemony has crushed every rebellion, silenced every voice. Now they see that it's possible to fight back. They see that one person can make a difference." "One person didn't do anything," said. "We had help. We got lucky." That's not what they see. They see a man who answered a cry for help and changed history. That's a story that matters. Looked at the refugees gathering in Aegis's massive docking bays. Families with children, old people with nothing left, young people with fire in their eyes. "What do they want from me?" he asked. "They want you to lead them," said. Was quiet for a long time. Then he shook his head. "I can't lead anyone. I'm not brave enough for that." Aegis spoke then, her voice gentle. "Do you remember what you told me when we first met? You said humans don't give up easily. You said it was your greatest strength." "That was different." "No, it was exactly the same. These people are crying for help just as I was. Will you answer them?" Closed his eyes. He thought about the loneliness he had felt after his court-martial. He thought about drifting through space with nothing to hope for. He thought about the voice in the dark, asking if anyone would answer. He opened his eyes. "Okay," he said quietly, "but I'm not doing this alone." A council was formed, took charge of medical services and refugee care. She built a hospital inside Aegis that could treat anyone, regardless of species or status, trained engineers and organized repair crews. He taught frontier mechanics how to fight with inferior ships against superior numbers. And Aegis became a teacher. She shared the knowledge of the secrets that had been lost for 4,000 years, not just weapons and technology, but philosophy, art, and history. She told stories of a civilization that had believed in beauty and honor. She taught songs that made even hardened soldiers weep. A dead civilization lived again through her voice. The fleet grew, salvaged ships were repaired and armed. Stolen hegemony vessels were captured and converted. Within 6 months, Aegis was not alone. She was the flagship of a growing rebellion. The hegemony responded with force. They sent another fleet, 30 ships this time, led by their dreadnought, the Absolute Authority. But the battle did not go as they expected. The rebel fleet fought using tactics no one had seen before. Small ships would dart in, draw fire, then retreat as Aegis struck from unexpected angles. Engineers performed repairs while under attack. Medics treated wounded in the middle of combat. It was chaos, it was ugly, and it worked. The hegemony fleet was driven back, not destroyed, but damaged enough to retreat. The rebellion had won its second victory. News spread across the galaxy. More people came. The fleet grew larger. But in the darkness between stars, something else was happening. Deep in unexplored space, far from any inhabited world, sensors that had been dormant for 4,000 years detected a signal. It was weak, almost invisible, but unmistakable. A ship was broadcasting. A ship was alive. The sensors sent the message home. In the void between galaxies, something woke up. They had not been destroyed in the ancient war. They had retreated. They had hidden. They had waited, building their strength in the darkness where no light could reach. For 4,000 years they had grown, and now they heard the call. Their enemy had returned. The still lived. Millions of ships began to move, a tide of darkness flowing toward the light. The first attack came without warning. 3 hegemony border systems were destroyed in a single day. Billions of people vanished, their worlds consumed. They did not conquer. They did not negotiate. They simply ate everything in their path. The galaxy panicked. The hegemony scrambled to respond, but their fleets were scattered. They had been preparing to crush a rebellion, not fight an extragalactic invasion. An emergency message arrived at Aegis's position. It was from the hegemony High Council, the very people who had declared a terrorist. "We need your help," read the message in the core chamber, surrounded by his council. Looked troubled, looked suspicious. "It's a trap," said. "They want to lure us in and destroy us." "Maybe," agreed, "but they are real. Aegis told us they would come, now they're here." Aegis spoke, her voice heavy with ancient pain. I remember what they did to my people. I remember watching worlds burn and knowing there was nothing I could do to stop it." She paused. "I do not want to remember that again. Not with these new people I have learned to love." Leaned forward. "What do you want to do, Aegis?" "I want to fight, not for the hegemony, not for revenge, for the people who came to us when they had nowhere else to go, for the children sleeping in my docking bays, for the future that we are building together." Looked at his friends. He saw the fear in their eyes, but also the determination. "We can't beat the alone," he said. "The hegemony can't beat them alone either, but together, maybe. They'll betray us," warned. "Probably, but right now, there's something worse than the hegemony out there. We deal with the bigger threat first." Stood up, he felt the weight of every life depending on his decision. He thought about the man he had been a year ago, alone and hopeless. He thought about the man he had become. "Send a response," he said. "Tell them we'll fight, but we fight as equals. No more hegemony, no more empire. After this is over, the galaxy governs itself." "They'll never agree to that," said. Smiled. "Then they can face the alone." The message was sent. The galaxy held its breath. And in the darkness, the kept coming. The hegemony agreed. They had no choice. Every day brought news of another system destroyed, another billion lives lost. They were not slowing down, they were accelerating. The combined fleet gathered at the threshold, a region of space where they had first invaded 4,000 years ago. It was here that they had made their last stand. It was here that history would repeat itself. Aegis led the fleet. Behind her sailed 300 ships, a mix of hegemony warships, rebel vessels, pirate cruisers, and civilian transports converted for war. It was the largest fleet ever assembled, and it was still not enough. The armada appeared on sensors, and hearts stopped across the fleet. There were thousands of them, tens of thousands. They blotted out the stars like a living shadow, moving with perfect coordination. At their center was the Queenship, a vessel even larger than Aegis, carrying the central intelligence of the entire hive. Kill the Queen, and they would die with her. Fail, and the galaxy would fall. Stood in the core chamber, his hand resting on the neural interface. His connection with Aegis was complete now, their minds linked so deeply that he could feel her emotions as his own. He felt her fear. He felt her determination. He felt her love. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I have waited 4,000 years for this moment," Aegis replied. "I am ready." The battle began. They attacked in waves, each ship a small piece of a larger mind. They did not fight like individuals. They fought like a single organism, coordinating perfectly, adapting instantly. Within minutes, the combined fleet was overwhelmed. Ships began to die. Hegemony cruisers exploded as weapons tore through their shields. Rebel vessels were swarmed by smaller attackers, dragged into the darkness and consumed. Screams filled the communication channels, then went silent. Worked miracles. He kept Aegis's systems running even as damage accumulated. When a power conduit exploded, he rerouted through backup systems. When a weapon overheated, he cooled it with emergency vents. He shouted orders to his engineering teams, keeping everyone focused on the impossible task of survival. Moved through the chaos like a ghost. Her medical bay was overflowing with wounded, her supplies running low. She prioritized ruthlessly, saving who she could, comforting those she could not. Her hands were steady even as tears streamed down her face. Commanded the fleet, but he also fought through Aegis. Their linked minds made her faster, more adaptable, more human. She dodged attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. She fired weapons with perfect precision. She protected other ships, taking hits meant for weaker vessels. But it was not enough. There were too many. The Queenship was advancing, and nothing could stop it. "We're losing," someone said over the command channel. It was the Hegemony Admiral, a woman named who had opposed the alliance until the end. Her voice was calm, accepting. "Then we die fighting," replied. "That's all we can do." Aegis spoke then, not just to, but to the entire fleet. Her voice carried across every ship, every speaker, every communication device. "Listen to me, all of you. I am Aegis, last ship of the 4,000 years ago, my people faced this enemy and fell. We burned ourselves rather than become something ugly. We died with dignity instead of living in chaos. We were fools." Her voice grew stronger. "The humans taught me something different. They taught me that survival is not surrender. They taught me that changing who you are is not weakness. They taught me that hope is worth fighting for, even when hope seems impossible." Across the fleet, exhausted soldiers looked up. Wounded mechanics stopped their work to listen. Everyone, hegemony and rebel alike, heard the ancient ship speak. "I am not asking you to die with dignity. I am asking you to fight ugly, to scream and claw and refuse to give up, to become whatever you must become to survive. That is what humans do. That is what we must do." Silence. Then, slowly, the fleet began to respond. Ships that had been retreating turned back. Damaged vessels pushed forward. The fear did not disappear, but it stopped being the only thing that mattered. Aegis dove toward the Queenship. They tried to stop her. Hundreds of smaller ships swarmed around her, firing everything they had. Her hull screamed as weapons tore into her. Her systems failed one by one, but she kept going. Felt every hit as if it was striking his own body. He felt Aegis dying, her ancient systems finally giving out. The human modifications were failing. The neural graft was overloading. "I am dying again," Aegis said. "But this time I am not alone. This time I die fighting. Thank you for answering." closed his eyes. He thought about the man he had been, alone and broken. He thought about the voice in the dark, asking for help. He thought about everything they had built together. "You're not dying," he said. "You're human now, and humans don't know when to quit." He made a decision. He opened the neural link completely, pouring his entire consciousness into Aegis. His memories, his emotions, his stubbornness, his refusal to accept defeat, everything he was flowed into her. Aegis screamed, not in pain but in defiance. New energy flooded her systems. Her lights blazed brighter than they had in 4,000 years. She was not anymore. She was not human. She was something new, something that had never existed before. She was hope. She struck the queenship at full speed, her hull tearing open, her weapons firing everything she had left. The impact shattered both vessels, sending debris spinning through space. Across the galaxy, ships went silent. The hive mind shattered with the death of its queen. Millions of bodies that had moved as one suddenly stopped moving at all. They drifted, empty and lifeless. The war was over. When rescue ships reached Aegis, they expected to find wreckage. Instead, they found a miracle. The ship had survived. Barely. Her hull was torn open, her weapons destroyed, her ancient systems finally dead, but her neural core still glowed, faint but alive. Was unconscious, still connected to the interface. When they woke him, he did not recognize them at first. His eyes were strange, flickering with lights that had no source. "Aegis," he whispered. "I am here," a voice said from everywhere and nowhere. "I am with you." The fusion was permanent. His mind was now part of Aegis, and Aegis was part of him. They were no longer separate beings. They were something new. In the months that followed, the galaxy rebuilt. The hegemony dissolved as had demanded. A new confederation took its place, democratic and decentralized, and became its first, building a government that served people instead of controlling them. Aegis was rebuilt, not as a warship, but as a monument and a school. She traveled the galaxy, teaching the combined knowledge of and human. She welcomed anyone who wanted to learn, sharing her memories of the past and her hopes for the future. One day, a child visited the ship. She was young, maybe 7 years old, with curious eyes and no fear. "What are you?" she asked. Aegis considered the question. She thought about the who had built her, the crew who had died for her, the humans who had saved her. She thought about whose thoughts still whispered in her mind. "I am what happens," she answered, "when someone answers a cry for help." The child smiled. "That's a good thing to be." Aegis felt warmth spread through her systems. It was not just heat, it was love. "Yes," she said, "it is." Outside, stars burned in the darkness. Somewhere on a frontier world, a mechanic was answering a distress call. Somewhere on a refugee ship, a doctor was saving a life. Somewhere in a graveyard of broken things, someone was deciding to try. The galaxy was vast and cold and dangerous, but it was also full of people who refused to let that stop them. People who heard cries in the void and answered anyway. That was the human way. That was what they had taught the stars, and the stars had learned.